What was it about the ancient Jedi that made them so much more powerful than the Jedi of the classic Republic era and even of the High Republic? And why exactly is it that the Jedi appeared to be weakening as the eras went by? Greetings, Acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the Archives. As the Peacekeepers of the Galaxy, the Jedi ensured that the members of their ranks are ready to keep peace by any means necessary. This often, though, requires Jedi to go to battle, ensuring peace by way of force. Wars were very common in the galaxy, especially during the days of the Old Republic. In fact, a massive war typically broke out every couple of decades, whether they were terrorist factions or the dark side enemy of the Jedi, the Sith. Most of the time, the Jedi would join as warriors to smooth things over, as protectors of the Republic. Having said this, there is a notable change in the way that the Jedi handled warfare in the days of the Old Republic and how they handled themselves during the Clone War. There has been a significant decline in the average Jedi's skill and power by the time of the Clone Wars era and when the Clone Wars broke out. The sheer number of Jedi casualties that occurred, among other things, is a testament to the diminished power and skill. It wasn't but 1,000 years earlier that the Jedi Knights were able to contend with some of the most legendary Sith Lords, and certain Jedi Masters were able to cut down a half-dozen Sith Acolytes before succumbing to death. Blaster-wielding opponents were a joke to the ancient Jedi, but were legitimate threats in the era of the Clone War. So what happened? What made the Jedi of the Old Republic such superior combatants? And why did these ancient Jedi command so much power in the Force? Well, today, we will open up a few holocrons and analyze this question. If you enjoy these daily uploads of knowledge, be sure to reach out and force crush that subscribe button. We have foreseen it. It is your destiny. Now, my friends, on to our analysis. There are two specific Jedi Masters that we want to take a look at and bring to comparison who lived during the era of the Old Republic, specifically during the time of the resurgent Sith Empire in the year 3650 BBY, a scant 300 years after the events of Revan's life. These two Jedi Masters in question are Ven Zalo and Keosen-Darach. We will be comparing how they handled their Sith adversaries compared to how the Jedi Masters of the Clone Wars era fought against the Sith that they encountered. Both of these Old Republic Jedi had suddenly found themselves in a life or death situation against extremely powerful Sith. Ven Zalo defended the Jedi Temple alongside a small army of knights that were there with him. He took down several blaster-wielding opponents amid the chaos of the war, and managed to cut down 2 Sith warriors with minimal effort. These 2 kills actually happened when Ven Zalo was in the middle of a duel with Malgus himself. Not even another powerful Sith Lord there, Lord Adras, Malgus' own rival, could stand up against the skill and power of Jedi Master Ven Zalo. His reaction time and saber maneuverability were legendary, but in my opinion, not as impressive as his fortitude. During the duel, Zalo was force pushed through a pyre of rubble, and yet, the Jedi warrior managed to get right back up and avoid Malgus' next attack, throwing himself almost 20 meters straight into the air. After this, Zalo continued his assault on Malgus, and in the novelization, it is revealed that Malgus actually allows Zalo to elbow him in the face, a maneuver that allows Malgus to slip the Jedi Master's guard and impale him through the stomach. With all of that said though, Darth Malgus was debatably the greatest duelist of this entire era, and Ven Zalo gave him a worthy fight. Now moving on, Keosen-Darach was the Jedi battle master of this era, and found himself in a duel again against Malgus and his master, Darth Vindican. With Satele at his side, he challenged the Sith warriors, having been the first Jedi to cross blades with the Sith in over 300 years. Despite being blindsided by the Sith and recovering from the shock of the Sith Empire returning, Keosen-Darach sprung into action, taking immediate steps to ensure that Satele would survive. He was clearly the superior duelist to the Inquisitor Darth Vindican, implementing the Force masterfully into his blade techniques. He also managed to redirect the Force lightning from Vindican into Malgus, and he was only defeated when his guard was smashed down by Malgus. But at the time, it could be said that blade to blade, removing Malgus' intense strength, that Keosen-Darach may have been the superior pure duelist. Again, at the time. Now let's compare this with the Clone Wars era, and the High Council member Luminara Unduli, who would have died at the hands of the acolyte Ventress had it not been for the interference of the Padawan Ahsoka Tano. Ventress was not a fully formed Sith, but a dark Jedi having been trained by Dooku. Her role was that of an assassin, and she was given dark side teachings and combat training from Dooku. However, she was never briefed on the true secrets of the dark side until she began her training with the Night Sisters much later. The key here though, is that Sidious and Dooku withheld knowledge from her that would have made her more powerful. We can also go on to mention that Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi only barely managed to defeat Darth Maul, despite being it a 2-against-1. In the novelization for The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn even exclaimed that he believed that he was about to be overwhelmed by the Sith assassin when they crossed blades for the first time on Tatooine. Again, Maul was trained to be an assassin, and by the direct order of Darth Plagueis, Sidious did not reveal the secrets of the Sith to him. But the ones on trial here today are not the Sith, they are the Jedi. Moving on, we must mention the death of Adi Gallia, another Jedi Council member who was absolutely destroyed and brutalized by the barely trained, yet extremely powerful Savage Opress. The point we are trying to get at here is that the Clone Wars Jedi, Council members even, are tragically dismantled by even low-level dark-side acolytes, or at least acolytes who have not been fully trained, unlike the likes of Malgus and Vindican. You can forget that any Jedi who tried to face an actual Sith Lord such as Count Dooku, that they were pitifully outmatched. The only real threats to Dooku in the Clone Wars was Mace Windu, Yoda, and of course Anakin Skywalker. Some may think that it is unfair to compare these two eras, but the reason that it is unfair in the first place is because of the weaknesses of the Clone Wars Jedi, and the fact that they are objectively weaker. The Old Republic Jedi found themselves in constant wartime, and by the time of the Clone Wars, it had been over 1,000 years since any of them had seen a Sith or crossed blades with one. Only Dark Jedi were there at the time, and they were extremely rare and nowhere near the power of a fledgling Dark Lord of the Sith. The Old Republic Jedi were in wars back to back, and it all starts with the Great Sith Wars. This was a time in the galaxy when the Jedi found themselves in a long battle with Exar Kun and his reborn Sith Order. The Jedi once again found themselves in this war with the Sith after the Third Great Schism, and it was after this war that the Jedi of the time realized that their old enemies were still around. Only a quick 50 years had passed, and the Mandalorian Wars broke out. And after that ended, it would be the Jedi Civil War when Darth Revan and Darth Malak returned and went on a campaign against the Republic and against the Jedi. But the conflict with the Sith was still not over. After Revan and Malak came the campaign of Darth Nihilus, Sion, and Darth Traya. After the first Jedi Purge, the Jedi found themselves in a place where they didn't intend to be taken advantage of again by the dark side, refusing to be massacred like they had been by Nihilus. This is when the Jedi completely changed the way that they trained. Now, they were training to be real, true rivals of the Sith. It would be another 300 years before the Sith Empire returned, and though the Republic and the Jedi were taken by surprise, their members were now heavily trained warriors, the purest warriors that the galaxy had ever seen. The members of the Jedi Order who fought in the Great Galactic War had far more experience and knowledge of the Sith. They were able to match them for maybe the first time in history, blow for blow. Their combat training was different, and you see, after the Battle of Ruusan, which would see the Brotherhood of Darkness and the Sith seemingly destroyed, the Republic grew very distrusting of the Jedi because they saw just how efficient warriors that they had become. The Jedi of this era is the definition of peace by force, and the wider public's understanding of the Jedi was true. They were extremely dangerous. This is why, at the time, Grandmaster Faye Coven wrote The Jedi Path, a new training manual to help reshape the Order for the future generations. The new Sith Wars had turned the Jedi into a military, and their members were trained solely for battle as soon as they entered Padawanship. The Jedi Grandmaster Faye Coven attempted to bring the Jedi back to a neutral space so that they could be scholars and peacekeepers, something that she believed they were always meant to be. She would achieve this dream, but at the cost of combat training. And many hundreds of years later, it would even be Dooku who would note that he believed the Jedi had become weak because of the simple fact that they put so much less emphasis on combat and spent more time in meditation than training with the blade. At the same time though, it is not as simple as Qui-Gon or other Jedi of the Clone Wars being weak. It is more so that the focus of the Jedi's training was overhauled for a new era. Before, the Jedi would have focused on lightsaber combat and learning stronger ways to manipulate the Force in a combative way. This put their combat training on par with that of the Sith for the first time in existence. But with the new ways, the Jedi were no longer to be so combative-minded. It had grown bad for the galaxy itself, and there were only a few Jedi Masters who would ever ascend to the level of an Old Republic Jedi. Masters like Yoda, Plo Koon, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Anakin Skywalker. But to end things, we must make one thing clear. An individual such as Chaos Dirach would absolutely obliterate somebody like Ventress or Savage Opress, and dark acolytes such as these paled in comparison to the awesome power of Darth Malgus. But now I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you believe that the Jedi that followed Fey Coven and the path of the Jedi went too far, and that the Jedi were weakened and therefore able to be overcome by the likes of Sidious and Dooku? Did the Jedi swing too far into the direction of peace that it weakened them too much? What are your thoughts on Jedi Grandmaster Fey Coven's new policies? Did this ultimately help or harm the Jedi? Thank you so much for your time today, my friends, and for visiting and supporting the channel in general. May the Force be with you, and I hope to see you again soon.